And we're live. It is Wednesday, November 27th, the day before Thanksgiving, which is a day on which we should all be resentful and angry and bitter. It is 8:00 a.m. Eastern Time. The sun is shining, the birds are chirping. It's going to be a great fucking day. And you are watching Dog Shirt TV, a revolution in morning television. And today, because it is the day before Thanksgiving, a day in which we all get out our bitterness and anger and resentments, so that tomorrow we can be charming and sweet and full of gratitude and tolerant of those relatives who say terrible things at the table. I don't actually have any of those, but I know some people do, and so we get out all of our resentments today, the day before Thanksgiving. We call it pre-Thanksgiving. And we are celebrating it on Dog Shirt TV by having a little discussion about having a culture of friendly disputation. This was raised yesterday by the estimable Eve Gaumond as something that she wanted to have a show about. I'm actually going to turn the show over almost entirely to her whenever she shows up. But a few thoughts. Ev and I talked yesterday afternoon and said, who is the person we most would want to hear from on this subject? And we decided it was David French, who, after all, lives among conservative evangelicals, of which he is one, but they are the Trump variety, and he is the never Trump variety. And he writes a column in the New York Times, which is mostly read by New York Times readers, of whom there is, a lot of interest in the never Trump variety, but the whole conservative evangelical varietal is not really to their taste. And David seems to float through life being friendly to everybody. So we thought David would be an ideal person to have. And we also thought we would invite Scott Shapiro so that he could respond with hostile profanity to everybody. But here's the problem. Scott responded, "Fuck off," when I suggested this to him. And David is already engaged in family stuff for Thanksgiving. So he's doing the pre-Thanksgiving vent your rage, leave out your, sink your teeth into your enemies thing. So David is unavailable today, and Scott said fuck off, so I don't know if he's showing up or not. But so we are doing part 1 of this today, and we're going to do part 2 whenever David French wants to join us sometime over the next couple weeks. So
David French. I love David French.
I love David French too.
Nancy French has blurbed my book.
She's a great American, as is he. So Ev, the sun is shining, the birds are chirping, it's going to be a great fucking day, and the show is yours today. I'm turning it over to you. I will speak when spoken to.
Good morning. Are we really doing a part 1? Or I was actually thinking that we could do a bit of scheduling. I don't know if you remember back in the good old days of In Lieu of Fun, it was planning on the show. And I think that we've kind of done a fair bit of just the host on this, speaking, and maybe we're kind of coming to the end of it, and we might be starting to look up.
You're suggesting we need some guests?
Yes. So first of all, maybe we could.
subject of the show entirely. I just gave an introduction that's completely wrong.
No, absolutely not. You've explained not lengthily, but you've spent some time explaining
Hey, it's
how
6
hard.
minutes.
Yeah,
5
sorry.
minutes.
Hey,
I got to use up 60 minutes here. Using when I get done with 5 on the introduction, that's not lengthy. That's a failure. I have failed to eat up more than 5 minutes on the introduction.
no, actually, I'm super grateful that you spent these 6 minutes speaking, because it's 1 to 6 minutes less that I have to speak. So I'm super grateful. But yeah, you've spent a bit of time explaining how figuring out what we're going to talk about and with whom is a struggle. So I thought that we could maybe spend some time doing it on the show with the help of maybe the Greek chorus, who could suggest some kind of topics that they want to talk about. And we can all brainstorm together, like, about what we want to talk about in the next week.
All right, let's do it.
Great, wonderful. So Holly, Benjamin, what are we talking about in the next 2 weeks? So, like, what's supposed to happen? What kind of stuff do we know that is gonna happen in the upcoming week? So, more nominations, I guess.
I mean, in the Trump era, do we ever know what's really going to happen? I mean, anything could happen. So now, yesterday, or the day before, was the beginning of a trade war. So did we know that was going to happen? I mean, we
declared war on Canada the other day, by the way. Did you notice?
Yeah, Ev, aren't you in Canada? Are you Canadian?
I am. Yeah.
So how
we're
do you
freaking
feel?
out.
You're going to be at war. Anyway, I myself am stockpiling ice skates. I assume those all come from Canada. And people are doing maple syrup. But I feel like we have Vermont, so I think we're okay on the maple syrup. No offense to the Canadian maple syrup. I don't know. What other products do you think we should stockpile? Ev?
I think wood, like,
Wood.
Wood?
Yeah.
We have a lot of
lumber.
trees. Honestly, I have enough wood in my yard to build whatever I need. I have so many trees.
But maybe this is a preparing for a trade war show is something we need to do.
Yeah. So, okay, good. Do we want to take it, like, in a funny way? So, like, just like shooting the shit about what would be funny to stack up in our basement,
or we get an actual, like, trade expert.
I think
we could do both. We could have an actual trade lawyer expert and then make fun of that person.
I wish my husband was not gagged by his employer, but unfortunately, he would be excellent.
It's one of the problems with the Fletcher family is you're all gagged by your employers.
Well, they tried to gag us. Only one of us came. My husband is so dignified. In fact, just side note, he has officially talked me out of doing the whole song that I'm doing, the parody song with expletives. So
wow.
Yeah,
but it's good that only one of the Fletchers honors the gag. The other one has chewed through it like a gerbil.
Well, it's good that one of the Fletchers actually cares about norms and
behavior
and company and all of those things. So he keeps me dignified. He also convinced me to not touch my face today. He watched the thing yesterday. I thought I looked very old, which is why I actually got up and combed my hair. I was shamed by Ev's delightful appearance and also your makeup game.
Oh, there's no, there's no makeup.
No, not your makeup game. Ben's.
Oh, okay,
Ben's makeup game.
Oh yeah,
I'm not wearing any makeup.
So I actually comb my hair and I don't look any better, frankly. So I don't know this is my problem with makeup is you do all this work and then you don't even look. Anyway, so he convinced me that I looked weird, and so I tried to remedy that, but it's probably not going to work. But I'm not allowed to touch my face at all. If you see me touching my face, just stop it. Just make it stop. How did I get on the subject? Sorry.
Yes. So, well, let's put so we need somebody to be following the Greek chorus here because I'm not, and the Greek chorus is a fountain of good ideas for shows. But I think, trade war is a great one, and I think having a combination of us making hoarding maple syrup and softwood lumber jokes and a trade expert trying to navigate whether we're serious or whether we that would be fun. Trade is an area I don't know that much about, so I would have to do a little bit of digging about who's the appropriate person. So, Ev, just so that you know, half of your face is now cut off in the frame. Yeah, much
Good.
better. Um, uh, so, all right, what else? What else do people want to talk about?
I think I am not super capable of following the Greek chorus either, but they should show up on screen.
Yeah.
They should show up on screen.
So if people, if Grecian chorus members, we need a name for members of the Greek chorus that's a little bit short of
Choristers. Richard
choristers, yeah, Grecian choristers. Want to make suggestions, jump in at any time. I am going to be, well, we have a ceasefire in Lebanon. That's
Yes.
kind of a subject
I was ask you about that. I have a question. I have another question for you. That's a good one. Pin, and then I have another question. So
yeah, so one problem with that is it's really not funny. But maybe, also the problem is another problem is that all the Hezbollah people have been killed, and so it's hard to actually get balance now, because you can get Israelis, but it's hard to get Hezbollah people. No, that was a joke. But yeah, we should have somebody talk about the wind down of this war.
isn't that you? I thought that was you.
Well, we're looking for guests here.
I see.
Ev is complaining in her very
I'm
delicate way that the show is too much of me talking and expecting her to talk.
Actually, I don't think it's about you, Ben, because I noticed that she was fine with the co-host situation until I came on the show yesterday, and now
that's right.
Arrived. She's arrived today, and it's like, we need more guests and less co-hosts, and I'm like, well, I don't know about that, Ev. I mean,
no. The truth is that I got a text message this morning saying, you're in charge of the show. And I was like, oh no, I'm not speaking for an whole hour. So walking towards here, was like, okay, what are we going to do to escape this situation? And I remember
Hey guys, we don't turn the camera on ourselves here. The backroom planning of the show is a mystery to the audience. We don't show that in public.
And that there is any backroom planning.
Says the man who just talked about Scott. Yeah.
There was if there was secret backroom planning. So we got a, relationship with truth here.
Right. So John Hawkinson, do you have ideas for the show?
Sure. I'm here for two reasons. One, to help monitor the chat, and two, to offer a suggestion of my own. So in reverse numerical order, the suggestion of my own is that you guys should invite the person known on Twitter as Ringwis, who is a UK university student who's apparently an expert on congressional parliamentary procedure. I think he'd be fascinating to talk to. Politico profiled him a couple months ago. Anyway, and
what's his name?
His name is Casper Surdy, but he just goes by Ringwis, Ringwiss.
Good.
And let's see. Also in the Greek chorus, there were some suggestions of repeat guests from In Lieu of Fun. Frank suggested Ada Palmer and Sarah Bond, who spoke about corvids.
Sarah Bond did not speak about corvids. Sarah Bond spoke about Roman history. There was a awesome woman who did corvid research, who's we had a couple times. I can't remember her name. And she was, but she's now living in some, in Papua New Guinea or something, because she's doing research on birds there. I forget which island she's on. So she may be hard to reach, but that's a great idea. And I have not spoken to Ada Palmer since the last time she was on In Lieu of Fun. So we should definitely remedy that.
And I should be clear, that's my fault for misinterpreting the serial comma as apposition and not the fault of other Greek choristers who clearly knew the right answer.
Well, I am a big fan of Sarah Bond. She is one of the things I have missed since being thrown off of Twitter. And I don't know if she's still on Twitter, but, these sever the connections. Are you keeping a list, Ev?
Yes.
All right.
Someone suggested Politics Girl, who is very fun to watch. So,
who is Politics Girl?
She's what do you call it? Does she do TikTok? I don't know. She does videos about politics, and she's very snappy. She talks very fast and also intelligently in her kitchen.
Interesting.
She's fun. And she's kind of funny, I guess. Someone suggested she would be a good improv partner with me, but I don't know. She looks way more professional than me. So
we can
she's
look into that.
Influencer. Yes.
An influencer.
Oh, well,
yeah.
Obviously Sarah Longwell, but good luck getting her. She's actually worked.
She was on recently.
Yeah, but she looked like she wanted to escape the entire time. I mean, let's just be honest.
Well, but come on, Sarah knows the drill. I was surprised she showed up.
Now JVL would be good.
Yeah, we can get JVL. Go ahead, Ev.
Speaking of influencers, would it be interesting to have someone to talk about influencers' culture and its impact on politics? I have no idea if she's interesting or not, but I know she's often the main character of discussions. But like Taylor Lawrence, I'm not sure. I don't know if she's cool or not.
I don't know her at all. Her time at the Washington Post entirely postdates mine. And I have no relationship with her, but I'm happy to reach out to her and invite her. The other one, of course, who works on that stuff professionally is Renee DiResta, who has been on the show relatively recently and is one of the people I gave an open invitation to show up anytime to.
Well,
I can always isolate that to a particular day.
Yeah, that would be actually better.
Lorenz, I just want to point out, in her Substack recently, she talked about the rise of live streaming, and I almost thought it was going to be about this show. It turned out not to be, but I just want to offer that as a hook when you're inviting her.
Yeah, so I think that anybody who writes about the rise of live streaming who has not experienced this show, which 18 people are currently watching live, I just want to point out, but that does include
the from yesterday, and I claim credit for that.
We attribute that entirely
Richard
to
says,
Holly.
We should invite influencers, those who are active in spreading H5N1. Influencers.
Yeah.
Aren't those people called birds?
Oh, no, I don't know. It could also be just regular flu people who don't get the flu vaccine.
Or the raw milk advocates who, help move the virus from the birds to the humans. I
just want to point out that we're not having Robert F. Kennedy Jr. on the show.
I mean, F? What are you doing here?
Well, this is
a lightsaber battle.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just remember, guys, this does end up on a podcast feed, and on the podcast feed, nobody can see you wave your lightsaber.
Well, we're waving lightsabers in front of the camera, and it looks exactly like a lightsaber battle. It's very cool.
It does. It really does.
Yeah.
So let's talk about I can follow up with some of these. Here's another question. Methodologically, are we doing invitations by, sending emails and writing texts, or are we only doing invitations by blue skying at people, in a fashion that's totally public and kind of annoying?
What do you prefer?
I think you should be classy, don't you?
What does classy mean?
Like,
Which one is the classy
have
option?
their number and you have their email, then you invite them like personally,
like a civilized person, rather than just like kind of tweet at them.
This is such a fascinating.
I think you should invite Ben. I think you should invite George Will, and then I should come on and just throw up on the side of the frame out of just being so nervous.
I just want to point out there's a whole generational question as to what the most celebratory and formal way to invite someone is. The preference of some people may well be to receive a phone call, but others would much prefer a DM or a public tweet. And I think
who uses a phone? It's terrifying.
It differs from person to person, and that's kind of the beauty of it.
Yeah,
phone call. Go ahead.
I once, I forget who it was. I just tweeted at them, "I assume you're coming on in lieu of fun tonight." And the person responded, "I assume so too, but what is in lieu of fun?" And so, like, sometimes it works really well. I wonder if Blue Sky is still too chaotic for it to work well.
There's only one way to find out, Ben. Conduct a natural experiment.
That's right. Which style works better?
Yeah,
we're going to find out. So here are everybody's instructions. When you see Blue Sky tweets from me, I refuse to call them skeets. When you see Blue Sky tweets, I don't know. People call them posts. I'm calling them fucking tweets. When you see a tweet from me that says, "Hey, so and so, when are you coming on Dog Shirt TV to discuss blah blah blah?" Your job is to respond, "It's a fucking revolution in morning television. Please join us. We want to hear from you." Like, so your guys' job is really to amplify the invitation and make it costly in terms of somebody's clout not to respond to it.
Okay, so Lebanon. Do we have any idea of people that we want to talk to?
Well, so you got three choices with the Middle East. You can go the Israeli route. You can treat it as you can go the Lebanon route, or you can go the American policy route, and those are different. Those are kind of different flavors, and they end up sounding very different. And so it really kind of depends who people want to hear from. Do you want to hear from the kind of what does it mean for the regional war more generally, in which case you want a kind of either American or Israeli perspective, because the Israelis are the ones who are involved in every spoke of that particular wheel? Do you want a kind of what does it mean for Lebanon, in which case you want somebody who's focused on the Lebanese side and understands the really complicated issue of the state's relationship with Hezbollah? Or do you want the voice that always gets left out of this, which is a kind of, and remember, the Hamas is not party to the ceasefire, so the war in Gaza continues. Do you want to actually focus on what's left in the war, in which case you might want a Palestinian perspective? an hour is not enough time to do more than one of those in a realistic way. And so I think the question is really, what are people most interested in?
I think that the three questions are interesting, but I have to admit that I am maybe less savvy, well, not savvy, but I don't know as much about Lebanon. So maybe we could have like a deep dive on relationship between Hezbollah and. But do you have someone in mind to talk about this?
Oh yeah, there are good people, including good people in Washington, who have a Lebanon focus. We had name is I'm blanking on the name of, but we had a very good guy from the Middle East Institute on the Lawfare podcast talking about exactly this the other day. His name will come to me momentarily. And so, like the whole, like, a quarter of the Lebanese population is displaced right now, and and a lot of buildings are destroyed. So and Lebanon was already, I wouldn't say quite a failed state, but certainly a underperforming state, a failing state. And so the question of what you know what Lebanon does right now, is this an opportunity to sort of get Hezbollah out of the power position? Is it just the latest step in the collapse of the Lebanese state? These are very legitimate questions, and they're not ones that American policymaking tends to think about very much, or because, we do kind of deal with the world as it is rather than as it could be. I don't know where Kim Gaddis is these days, but she's also sort of wonderfully thoughtful on these subjects. So there's lots of people we could get to talk about the Lebanon side.
And about the Palestinian, do you have anyone in mind?
So again, there's there are lots of good Palestinian analysts who are around Washington, also in the region, and the question of it's pretty hard to reach Gaza Palestinians right now, who tend to be displaced and don't have stable internet connections, and so you're dealing with people who are either in the West Bank, or who are Palestinian citizens of Israel, or who are in the United States or Europe. But there are lots of them, and many of them are kind of good, thoughtful analysts. So there's no problem with finding people to speak from that perspective.
No, I know. I'm just trying to gather a list so that afterwards we can kind of start doing invitations. So if you have anyone just that off the top of your head.
I mean, my former Brookings colleague Khalid El-Gindi, who's I think now at also at MEI at the Middle East Institute. There's Tammy, remind me what the name of Noah's friend at Omdim V'Yachad? Sally Abed, who's Palestinian Israeli, who's wonderful. One of the problems with doing this show in the 8 to 9 hour is that, like, names just, I haven't caffeinated enough that names. But Sally Abed, who was supposed to come on in lieu of fun once, and then we never managed to get a time to do it. So she's an unusual figure because she's Palestinian, but she's also an Israeli citizen, and she's the organization that she helps run is a kind of a fascinating coalition of Israeli left civil society. So yeah, I mean, there's people from all walks of life that we could get, but you could fill up like 15 shows of without discussing anything else. There's also, Noah Ephron, who's my Tammy and my old friend, who's been on the show a number of times, and he's, very good at the sort of wide angle Israeli and regional society questions. So, like, it really just depends what people are interested in hearing about.
There were some other suggestions in the chat from a bit back that, if now's the right time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wait a minute. Are we having shows tomorrow and Friday, or is it Thanksgiving?
Not tomorrow. No show tomorrow, people.
I wasn't there. Sorry. Okay, good.
Zero show.
Good. No, it's not Thanksgiving in Canada, but I feel like every day is Thanksgiving in Canada because you're not.
No, it's sorry
under the regime of Donald Trump.
Hey, how many shows are there going to be tomorrow?
Super hot. I'm sorry.
Zero shows tomorrow. There will be a show on Friday, but it will be. We're not going to invite a guest for the day after Thanksgiving. That's
even if it's in Israeli. Even if could it be like?
We could do.
No,
we could do like after Thanksgiving while you're digesting. How bad is it? And if you think it's bad here, Noah Ephron reads you the Riot Act.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I could happily invite Noah for the day after Thanksgiving.
Okay, let's try Noah Ephron on Friday. Yep.
I have a few other unrelated Middle Eastern ideas. I'm going to stay away from Middle Eastern shows because I have nothing to contribute, and also it's not fun. So I'm just going to. I'll listen, of course, in the podcast, but I ain't getting up early for that. Okay, so a couple ideas. First of all, once I'm fully unmuzzled, I will do a full hour on Africa. I will make it entertaining. I will make it interesting. I know no one gives a shit about Africa. That is one of my big takeaways from the last 20 years, is that no one gives a shit about Africa.
Well, we give a shit on Dog Shirt TV.
Well, I will make it interesting.
And and here's the thing. We can do more than an hour. We could do different hours on different countries. We could have I don't
know if I could talk a full hour on, well, some countries I can, but like there's a lot of countries in Africa.
I did know that.
And it's actually hard to be an expert on all of them. I know, like, this is one of my frustrations.
Like, how much Burundi expertise do you really have?
If you're like an Africa expert, like, you're supposed to know like every detail of all 49 sub-Saharan. And I'm like, who knows? Like, you can just be a Russia expert and no one expects you to also know, some like, Uzbekistan. Like, you can just do Russia. So like, what people that do it's like, you don't have anything to say about Sierra Leonean politics. It's like, no, I don't. It's 49 entire countries. People don't understand this, but it's like a lot of countries. They're all different. They all have their own governments and their own histories and their own people, and it's just like mind blowing. So
it's like what Steve Martin said about going to France. He said,
I didn't hear that. What did he say?
It's like those French have a different word for everything.
I know. Yeah. Anyway,
it's kind of like that. Only it's 49 countries. So
inserting that. And then the other thing is maybe Ev could do a deep dive for us on Canadian politics, because I got into an interesting, and when I say interesting, I mean very boring, conversation on Blue Sky yesterday. I made a comment about Canada and hoarding ice skates and the trade war, and also the hot prime minister, which, I mean, that's the sum total of what I know about Canadian politics. Is like, I don't know what you're complaining about, because your prime minister looks like a freaking supermodel. I mean, seriously. So anyway, but then the Canadians like swarmed the what is it called? What are we calling us? Tweet? Skeet? I don't
We're
know
just
what it's called.
calling them tweets.
The post, or okay. The Canadians
verb
like
to
swarmed, and
tweet
then they
no
got into
longer
a whole like
means
political
anything
debate.
to do with Twitter. It means to post on a microblogging site.
Okay. So
at least
they
in
got
this
into a whole
ecosystem
debate, and like they were like going at it, and like I'm like, this is so adorable how like they're talking about like actual policies and things like that, and I don't even think anyone has attempted a coup up there. So I don't know, that could be refreshing, is to understand like what are, but then one of them did mention that there's like a looming fascist threat in Canada as well. Of course
so we
there is.
talked about the looming fascist threat in Canada the other day.
Oh, you did?
On the show, yeah. We talked about the
that.
looming one in Finland too.
Finland?
Yeah. Did you know that the fascists have been co-opted into government in Finland? They're part of the government. And
so disturbing. I thought I could count on the Finns.
Well, you can count on the Finns to absorb the fascists and sort of neuter them by putting them in control of the finance ministries.
Speaking of Finland, how's Mina? And then let's come back to John. But like,
Minna is well. We should have her on.
I think so.
Yeah, she's even in the United States right now. So yeah, let's put her on the list.
It's added, and then John.
John, so you have suggestions from the Greek chorus.
Oh. I do. So Frank had offered earlier, quite a while back now, Kathleen Ballou, who is not someone I know very well. So Ben, maybe you could blurb her. But
Kathleen Ballou is a scholar at Northwestern, I believe. She is a scholar of domestic white supremacists and was a occasional guest on In Lieu of Fun, and is very thoughtful and very smart, and I think very highly of, and would be happy to have her on anytime.
And he also suggests her husband, Geraldo Cadava, who is an expert in conservative Hispanics.
I have never heard of him, and did not know he was married to Kathleen Ballou, but that is a lovely idea, and I will look into that.
I have a guest suggestion. Oh, sorry.
Ahead,
I keep thinking people are done.
Go ahead, Holly. I'll come back.
I have a guest suggestion too. Our mutual friend, I believe our mutual friend, maybe you secretly dislike her, but Yael Eisenstadt on social media. And do you know her, Ev? That's kind of
by name, yes.
Yeah.
So just for the record, I've never been accused on national television with 20 people watching of secretly disliking somebody. I do not dislike Yael Eisenstadt.
You just never know.
I'm very fond of Yael, and she is welcome on the show anytime.
I will tell her. She is a friend of mine.
Then, wow, my voice has gotten eaten by a frog, which is probably a sign of something.
Well, it's a sign that Rick Grinnell crawled into your bed last night and sank his fangs into you.
I wore socks to bed last night, I'll have you know, Ben, just for this reason.
Yeah, well, yeah, as well you all should.
So Loredana suggests Jackie Payne, who is the founder of Galvanize, a group that built messaging for white women in swing states.
I do not know Jackie Payne, nor do I know the group, but I will. We can look into that.
She also suggests Dash Dabrowski from the Gen Z perspective, who I guess does podcasts.
Put it in the same category.
Yep.
Unknown to me, everything in the Gen Z capacity is in Ev's department, not in mine. Are you Gen Z technically, or are you
I'm on
millennial?
the line. I'm like I'm very like fluent in both. I'm really on the border between the two generations.
And also several people suggested the return of President Ilves. Now, I think that is really up to you as in the Benjamin Wittes International Relations Department.
So, Tomas is a good friend, and he's also in a very convenient time zone, which is the same one that Auntie is in, for this, the West Coast hates the new schedule of In Lieu of Fun / Dogshirt TV, but Europe loves it. Hello, Auntie Ruokonen.
I'm going to go off so you have only 4.
All right. Thanks, John.
Thank you. Hello.
Hey.
So I actually had a topic suggestion for the future, distant or otherwise, ballroom dancing.
Like just to talk about it or to do it on here?
Yeah, just to talk about how marvelous it is.
So I am for this subject with the caveat that I know very little about the subject, and so you would have to those who know something about it would have to help find guests. But I have a young Ukrainian friend who was like a competitive ballroom dancer all through her teen years.
That would be great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. So, and I know, Auntie, you are very serious about ballroom dancing.
Yeah, I am.
Is it big in Finland? You're in Finland, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's
Is it big there?
Yeah, I mean, it's the sort of thing that's that used to be the sort of main vehicle for social get-togethers back in the day. Let's say in the 50s, 60s, and from at least the 1800s or not early 1900s. So it was the basic medium where young and old people got together and met, and I think it was the only venue when it was somehow socially acceptable for men and women to be together in the same setting.
And what is its prominence now? So when I was in Finland for projection operations, there was a outdoor ballroom platform right outside my hotel window that had a bar, and that every evening that I was there was like quite a collection of people dancing, and there were people teaching classes. Is it a sort of like a day-to-day thing that a lot of people do in Finland?
Well, I mean, there's I guess you would say that there's 2 parts to it. One is the learning of ballroom dancing through courses and events and so forth, and the other one is the dancing events themselves. And there's on any given day there's going to be events somewhere in Finland. Obviously not always in the same place at the same time, but it's more of a summer hobby in the sense that there are quite a few venues that are open only in the summer, and you could even in a provincial setting, you could easily during the summer go from one dancing event to another, and you would be able to go to one every day. But in the winter, it's a bit more limited. There are venues available, but there are fewer of them, and usually they are quite a lot smaller.
Mm-hmm.
But there's been a sort of resurgence in the last couple of years, and more younger people are getting back to it. So it's still very much alive.
Super interesting. Let's put that on the list.
It is.
And Auntie, if you have people that are particularly if they're on Blue Sky, send them our way, and we will harass them.
I think that most of them are offline from this particular vehicle, but if I find any, I will let you know.
All right.
Thanks.
I don't have I don't think this is a topic for a whole show, but I do have a question for you today, Ben, on an item in the news I saw in the news. So I don't know when the appropriate time would be.
Well, that's up to Ev. Have we
Oh,
finished
Ev,
the
yes, sorry, I forget Ev is the boss of
have we
No, go
everybody
ahead,
finished
go
today.
ahead, go
have we
ahead.
finished the planning the show part of the discussion?
I think that we have a good list. Yeah, I think that we can move forward with
All right.
substantive conversations.
All right. So, Ben, this is in the legal realm, so I thought maybe you could enlighten us. I saw an item about Rudy being rude to these election workers still and not handing over his Mercedes and various other accoutrements. And here's the thing, but then this raises broader questions for me, which is I really do not understand these libel judgments, these civil judgments where you have to give people, because it seems like nobody actually pays very much, or some of them don't, a lot of them don't. And I'm just wondering if you can enlighten me on like what is going on with this particular case. But then also like I did see InfoWars finally was sold, but Alex Jones is still out there doing his I wouldn't call it work, his fraud. So can you enlighten us on like on this issue?
So first of all, the premise of your question is incorrect. The libel
I can't
cases
believe that.
have been really the most effective measure of accountability for post that exists. I mean, at least for people with means, they've been much more effective than the criminal process. They've been much more effective than so a couple things. I like that, Ev, the occasional burst of balloons for no reason.
I think I figured it out though. I think that there's some very, very minor construction work going on here, and I think it think that the algorithm think it's like some sort of a like the flute that you use, like
the flute.
Yeah, during birthdays, like people have like
so like a thing. Yeah, I see.
A kazoo.
Yeah, a kazoo. So I think it is what's happening.
So, first of all, nobody ever expected that Rudy Giuliani would pay $83 million or whatever that judgment was. He doesn't have those resources. What this litigation has done is it has created a massive debt, a court enforceable debt, that is actually has required that he turn over a bunch of stuff, including his apartment, by the way, to Shay Moss and Ruby Freeman. New York City penthouse apartment is not a trivial asset.
They just throw a big party.
There are also some Super Bowl rings or some World Series rings. There's the Mercedes that was driven by, I forget who, in what movie. And there's some real stuff. These are not useful items for Shay Moss and Ruby Freeman, but they're liquidatable for cash that is useful. And so I would not say that this has been an unuseful process for them at all. And what it has certainly done is hobbled Rudy Giuliani's ability to live like a rich person, which is what he was
to hobble their ability to be a problem, though.
So I don't know what Rudy Giuliani would have been doing with the last year but for this process, but he has actually spent the year mostly contesting this process. And so I think it's had a real impact on him. Look, Alex Jones is a different story because he's I think I can say this without risking he's in a clinically different place, right? He's a very unusual person, and he's but eventually InfoWars has been he's really sought to hide assets. He's sought to, make himself judgment proof. But eventually, InfoWars is being liquidated, and these are assets that are worth an enormous amount of money. Whether they end up being the property of the Onion or whether they end up, in some other, taking away the name InfoWars, and in real terms, all of the URLs that are associated with Alex Jones. He's been assiduous over the years in accumulating these URLs. These are hugely valuable things, and there's a positive version of it, which is that these assets are being liquidated and distributed among Sandy Hook victim families. But there's also the negative thing, which is he was monetizing those to a extraordinary degree. I mean, the number of people who watched InfoWars and, had, I mean, that's a huge market. And so simply depriving him of it is a significant factor. And then while we're talking about these defamation judgments, don't forget Fox News and some of the other networks and Dominion voting systems, right? These are not all individuals who have been persecuted, though that's the major thing. There's also these companies that have had their executives terrorized, and I had a very glancing interaction with this process recently when I want to be careful how I talk about this. When Anna Bauer and I were writing the story about Mr. Clements, who has called for the execution by hanging and or firing squad of Dominion voting systems executives after appropriate military commission due process. And, we had to go to Dominion and get comment about that. And, they were, these are like the campaign of defamation makes real differences in the lives of companies, but also in the executives of those companies. Well, Dominion got a $780 million judgment or not judgment, but settlement from Fox News. And by the way, that is being paid or has been paid. And
okay.
I actually think that, for mild, for the general media ecosystem shit, like that Twitter is a toxic place and stuff, and defamation law has very little useful to say, because Section 230, and by the way, most people who say mean things about people you're not going to actually sue them. So, but for the really egregious people who have behaved really, really badly, defamation law has overperformed relative to everything else. So Rudy Giuliani, if you believe the federal government, he's committed crimes. If you believe the government of Georgia and Arizona, he's committed crimes. But he hasn't faced the music for any of those crimes. What has he been? He's been held liable for defamation, and he's been disbarred. And those are the two processes, attorney discipline and defamation, that when you look across the landscape, you say, and by the way, I promise, if anybody defames me, and people do on a fairly regular basis, I will study your asset portfolio And
so I guess Rick Grinnell just isn't worth it.
So Rick Grinnell I don't think that anything he's said about me is actionable. He's implied some things that are actionable, but he hasn't said them directly enough. But I promise, if you defame me, not you, Holly Berkley Fletcher, or you, Ev
I'm just
Gaumond,
gonna
but
say it's too late. I've already
you
done
out
that.
there in the world, I promise I will sue you. And I just want that out there for the people who, think
This is
you
good for your cult leader cred.
I'm
out there.
but I'm not gonna bring a case I'm not gonna win. I don't sue people for harassment purposes. I sometimes get sued for harassment purposes, but I don't do that. But if you defame me, I will follow you to the ends of the earth. And I will pay whatever I have to pay in lawyers' fees to make your life such that you regret and never do something like that again to anybody. And that's a promise.
See, that's the piece that I'm confused about. Okay, like the money, I guess there's the reason it seems slow sometimes, or that it doesn't actually happen is because the wheels of justice go so slowly. But the real accountability, the sort of repentance piece of it, where they stop doing the bad thing, or like it makes some meaningful difference. I know Fox News now, like if someone comes on and says the 2020 election lie or whatever, they sometimes will break in and be like, oh, like that's not new. But then everybody knows that they're just have to do that or whatever. Alex Jones.
But wait a minute, that's a difference.
Well, are they still polluting people's brains and on the air? And Alex Jones is still broadcasting, I guess.
I will not defend. First of all, Alex Jones is still broadcasting, but he doesn't get the proceeds from those, and eventually he will not be able to do that anymore. So I'm not I'm not saying there's a perfect solution. I am saying the world in which Alex Jones's hands are tied the way they are tied now is a better world than the world in which, Alex Jones is, Prometheus Unbound, right? And I want the Griffin picking at his liver every day. And I want Rudy Giuliani to be, instead of organizing the terrorizing of Shay Moss and Ruby Freeman, I want him out there complaining that he can't hail a cab because he has no cash. Like, that's a better world. Is it a perfect world? No. Is it better than what the criminal justice system has produced for us? Yeah. And so I look at accountability not relative to what is ideal from my point of view, but relative to what is obtainable by other means. And I look at this defamation system and say, hey, given that the product liability standard for these organizations is, actual malice, right? Like, this is the friendliest product liability standard for defendants in the world, right? It's not, anybody else would kill to have the product liability standard that these guys have. And they're losing anyway because their conduct is that bad. And I'm really, it's not the part of the system that I'm looking at and saying, hey, this has failed us.
What about the E. Jean case? Like, has Trump paid that, or what's going on?
I don't think he's paid that, but I think that's because it's under appeal, and that's legitimate.
She's going to get her money in her lifetime.
I think she is. Okay. I think that case is. That's like, I think it's like $150 million or something. And my impression, I did not sit through that trial, but my impression is that there's nothing obviously defective about that verdict. Case was supervised by a very fine judge. unlike the $450 million verdict from the state AG, which I think does have some real problems and which, may get thrown out or at least massively reduced. Look, the size of the verdict judgment may come down. It's very common for appeals courts to lower.
But how will the appeal play out, like with Trump being president?
So first of all, it's his appeal. He's allowed to appeal while president. And so and it's not for conduct that mostly he couldn't claim reasonable immunity for. It's stuff that he. So I just, some portion of that judgment is going to stand. We're out of time. We are going to leave it there. Holly Berkley Fletcher, Ev Gaumond. Ev, let's huddle afterwards about getting some invitations out. Thank you for this excellent suggestion. And we will be back, not tomorrow, because there are 0 shows tomorrow, but on Friday. And join us, keep the faith, and we will talk to you soon.